Hi folks, I'm Ben Starr. Welcome to my kitchen. And as you probably already know, I am on the short list for one of the best jobs in the world. And if I get that job, TasteMaster, I will be spending 6 months in Western Australia exploring the culinary scene there. Their most interesting and unique food, wine, and beer. And it's actually a perfect job for me because I'm a travel writer, a chef, and I make my own wine and beer. So I think I'm actually perfect for the job, but I'm going to get a little bit of a head start tonight by introducing you all to one of the most quintessential Australian ingredients. You know what it is? You got it. Kangaroo. We are going to cook with kangaroo today. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, the majority of my American audience is probably squirming in their seats right now thinking, kangaroo, that's gross. But take it easy, folks. Kangaroo is to Australia what deer and venison is to the United States. Kangaroo is just their deer. Kangaroo jump out into the middle of the road in the middle of the night and crash your car. And kangaroos are very popular for hunters. It's a wonderful game meat. It's also farmed by many specialty farms that export kangaroo meat around the world to many fine restaurants. Now, that probably leads you to a second question: where on earth would I find kangaroo meat? Well, I live in the Dallas area, and all of my specialty meat suppliers stock kangaroo meat as part of their regular inventory. So it's really not that unusual a meat. You're just not likely to find it at your local supermarket. So get on Google, type in specialty meats or game meats, plus your zip code or your city name, and you're probably going to find somebody that can stock kangaroo or can get it for you if you want it. Now, like most game meats, kangaroo meat is incredibly lean. It has about as much saturated fat content as a chicken breast. So that's great for those of you who love red meat but need to lower your saturated fat or cholesterol intake. However, having such a small amount of intramuscular fat presents a lot of challenges for the cook because this kangaroo meat can dry out and overcook just like that. So we have to use some special preparation techniques to ensure that our kangaroo is moist, juicy, and delicious. And to me, that means brining. Brining is what I do with almost all of my game meats, and it basically just means to soak the meat or the muscle in a solution of salt water. Sometimes you can add flavoring agents and sugar as well. So my kangaroo loins here have been in this brine, and you can get the recipe for the brine on my website, benstarr.com, for about 3 hours in the fridge. And that means they are now perfectly seasoned with salt all the way through to the inside in a way you'd never be able to do just by salting the outside. It also means that this loin has gained about 20% of its weight in water, which means it's a lot more moist than it exists in nature. And when we cook it, that water is going to steam from the inside out and make sure that our cut of meat is perfectly juicy and tender. So after you remove your loins from the brine, we're going to dredge them in some seasoned flour. Now this flour has a lot of powdered garlic and freshly, coarsely cracked black pepper in it. There is no salt needed in our dredge because the loins have already been brined, so they don't need any additional salt. They are as salty as they need to be. I'll just keep going with my other loins here. Now it's time to sear these babies and get a really good, delicious crust on them. And for that, you want a heavy skillet, like a cast iron skillet or a griddle. You also want an oil with a high smoke point, like canola. If you use one of the other oils, like olive oil, which is my preferable cooking oil of choice, you're going to end up with a lot of smoke. But regardless, you're going to end up with a lot of smoke. Searing meat creates smoke. So open your windows, turn on your vent, and to this screaming hot pan that you've been preheating over high heat, add a few tablespoons of olive oil and a few tablespoons of butter. This adds really delicious flavor and browning. And see, before we even have the meat in the pan, we've already got smoke coming off that butter. Now we're going to take our loin and lay it right there. Get a nice good sear on it. Fiddle with this. Let it take a good 60 to 90 seconds to form that crust, and then roll it over to the other side and look at that beautiful, beautiful sear. Once all your loins are nicely seared off, you're going to remove them from the pan and let them rest and cool down just a bit before we proceed with the second phase of cooking. but we've still got a hot pan with lots of flavor in the bottom of it, and I'm going to utilize that by making a quick mushroom sauce. I'm going to add some mushrooms. It's important when you cook mushrooms that you don't crowd the pan, otherwise they won't brown. But if you give them some space, mushrooms will brown up just like meat, and it's beautiful. So when you've got your mushrooms out of this pan, you can reduce the heat to about medium, add yourself a little more oil, and some shallots. You can also use garlic if you want to. And once your shallots have had a quick sweat in that pan, hit it with some white wine. Woo! Glasses are clogging up. Give the bottom of that pan a really good scrape to get off all of that delicious fond from the bottom of the pan that gives our sauce that really rich, deep flavor. And when your wine is almost reduced off, you're going to add about 4 cups of chicken stock. We're going to let that reduce by at least a half. Now that our loins have had a chance to cool down just a little bit from the pan, we're going to insert a thermometer, and a meat thermometer is an invaluable tool, especially when you're cooking game that's going to overcook in just a few seconds. And we're going to insert that into the very center of the thickest part of the loin so that we know exactly what our temperature is going to be. Kangaroo loins are going to go into the oven at 350 degrees until they hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit as their internal temperature. There's no way to time that. Everyone is going to be different. That's why you absolutely have to use a meat thermometer. Chat candidly for a bit. You cannot cook kangaroo past medium rare. You just can't do it. In the same way that you can't cook venison past medium rare. If somebody wants their venison ordered medium well, it's going to be a leather boot. That's just the way it is. Now the brining will help it retain some moisture even if you have to cook it that far. But I strongly encourage you to pull your kangaroo loins as soon as that internal temperature hits 120 degrees. They're going to continue to coast up to about 125, which is going to be a perfect rare. You can cook it to 125 or 130, but anything more than 130 is going to result in kangaroo boots. And you don't want kangaroo boots, you want kangaroo loin, right? Right. Now when our chicken stock is reduced by about half, we're going to start to thicken this sauce by adding a beurre manie. And that is just a really fancy word for equal parts of butter and flour that have been mashed together into a paste. And as that butter melts and the flour and starch is released into that sauce, it's going to start thickening up. And when the sauce is nice and thick, we're going to return those sauteed mushrooms to the sauce. Reduce the heat to low. And get those mushrooms just a minute or two to simmer in that delicious sauce. Now, doesn't that look good? A perfect accompaniment for kangaroo. Alright, we pull the loins as soon as they hit 120 degrees Fahrenheit internal temperature. Now set them on your countertop and don't touch them for 10 minutes. If you try to slice into them now, all those juices are just going to run out of the meat, and we've worked so hard to keep them in there to make sure they're moist, tender, and juicy. So ignore them for 10 minutes, and then, and only then, can you slice them. Now I really wanted to serve my kangaroo tonight with a beautiful wine from Western Australia. Many Americans are familiar with the wines of Southeast Australia, but they're not as familiar with the Western Australian wines because they're actually really hard to find, especially in my part of the U.S. around Texas. We're practically ignorant of these incredible wines that come from the Margaret River and the Swan Valley. But ironically enough, it was in the Swan Valley at the Riverbank Estate where I first discovered my true love for fine wine. But unfortunately, no distributors in this area are able to get a hold of Western Australian wines, so I am hoping that during my tenure as TasteMaster that will change and we can introduce these incredible wines to a much broader audience. But for tonight, we're stuck with one of my homemade wines. After you've let this baby sit and relax, then you can cut it open, and if you have cooked it to the proper temperature, you're going to see a nice, beautiful color on the inside, full of delicious juice, and that is going to be good. Alright, so I've got my beautiful loins here plated with some crispy fried potatoes and our mushroom sauce, some asparagus from my garden, a nice little salad, and some homemade bread. And I'm going to finish it off with a handful of fried morels that I foraged from the wild this weekend. That is going to be fabulous. So I hope you've enjoyed this little introduction to the foods of Down Under. Hit my website, benstarr.com, to find out how you can help me become Western Australia's TasteMaster, and I will see you in Perth.
Firmer than steak.
Oh, that is beautiful.
Is it like venison?